One of the things that my mother told me right before I went to college, she said, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget where you came from. I know you heard it. In other words, remember where you came from. Don't get the big head. We were about the first generation, second generation of Wilsons that have gone to college. We were going away to college. We were going to see the world. Things had gotten better for our people. We were hopefully going to come out with better jobs, see more experiences, things of that nature there. And sometimes when we go out and we do better, we go to the quote-unquote promised land where we're living in a nice house, where we have a nice car to drive, we have food to eat, we have nice clothes to wear. Sometimes if we're not careful, we will forget where we came from. In other words, we'll forget how it was before we went off to college, before we had the job, before we had the house, before we had the clothes, before we had the car. We'll forget. And then, in other words, by forgetting, we'll forget to help others who may be struggling like we used to struggle. And so in our passage today, Moses is going to speak to a people that are going to a promised land, and his major concern is for them not to forget where they came from, to remember that they were once slaves in Egypt. Stay tuned for this lesson. Let's see what else Moses has to say. Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. John W. Wilson III, bringing you the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, January the 30th, 2022. I hope your new year is going well for you. Our title for this lesson is Justice and the Marginalized. Justice and the Marginalized. We will come from Exodus chapter 24. We'll look at verses 10 through 22. But before we get started, I need you to like, share, subscribe if this lesson is a blessing to you. I would also request, leave a comment in the comment section. I love dialoguing with you. I love hearing from you. It gives me tremendous encouragement. So just write something in the comment, something helpful, something I can do better, something you like about the lesson, or you want to add something to the lesson. Whatever you want to leave, that's fine with me. So let's get right into this lesson. It's a great lesson. It's a thoughtful lesson. It's a lesson that we have to really pay attention to, because we can fall into a trap where we forget what Moses is trying to emphasize to his people right before they go to the promised land. So, as we remember last week, 40 years has passed. The people of Israel have been in the wilderness for 40 years. They had an opportunity to get into the promised land. They believed 10 spies versus the 2 spies. They believed what the naysayers or the haters were saying instead of what the word of God said. And so as a result, that entire generation, those who were, I think, 20 and over, died in the wilderness. And those who were 20 and younger, I believe, that was the new generation. And that's the generation, along with Moses and a couple of others, are going into the promised land. Okay? That's Caleb and Joshua. You got Moses is not going to make it, but Caleb and Joshua and that new generation are making it into the promised land. But so Moses right here is writing a series of sermons. I mentioned it last week. Chapters 1 through 31 is really a series of sermons that Moses is writing to his people to prepare them for living in the promised land. Remember, he wants them to prosper, okay? Doesn't want something to happen like the last generation where it's a great disappointment and they don't possess the land, or if they get in the land, they're unable to hang on to it because of their evil ways. So he's giving them a series of instructions on how to live in the land. He's laying out rules and regulations, guidelines, ethical principles of how to live in this promised land, how to live pleasing to God, how to get along. So he's forming a structure. Now, Deuteronomy is called the second law. I talked about that last week. It's a rehashing or re-preaching of what Moses gave to the people at the foot of Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 20. So the wording is going to be a little bit different, but it's fundamentally the same message, and he's giving it to them. And what Moses' concern is here is that they're going to the land of milk and honey. God has great things planned for them. They're going to have a lot of land. You got to remember, for 40 years, they were nomads. They traveled in tents from place to place. They owned nothing. Now they're going to go into the land. God's going to give it to them. Okay? He's going to take care of his enemies for them. And then the 12 tribes of Israel, except for the Levitical tribe, well, I guess to be 11 tribes, will have their own land. The Levites, the tribe from Levi, will not. The people will support them. And they'll be broken out in territories. And so they're gonna prosper. They're going to have plenty of food to eat, where in the wilderness, God provided for them. It was desert. It wasn't an abundance amount of food. But where they're going now is going to be a land of milk and honey. It is prosperous for them. And so what Moses does not want to happen, he doesn't want them to forget how it was in the past generation when they lived in Egypt under slavery. Sometimes we can remember what our past was like, or what our ancestors had gone through, then that makes us a better people. And what Moses is hoping that they can remember what God has brought them through, and that will make them a better people, a more obedient people, and they will get along better. So he's laying out some rules and regulations for them how to live. My son, one of my sons, lives in an apartment, and so he got a roommate, and they moved into the apartment, and they did not have a lease agreement, did not have rules and regulations, did not have who would pay this and who would pay that, how much rent you would pay, how much rent the other person would. None of that was in writing. And so when you don't have things in writing, things can go awry. And with my son, who has his apartment with a roommate, people started to forget what was said originally, and it caused some problem. And what Moses is trying to do is to avoid this. He's going to put it in writing so they can refer back to how God expects them to live. They can refer back what Moses set out that was supposed to be the law. So Moses is putting in writing for their reference, and that's going to help them as they go forward into the promised land. So let's look into chapter 24. Our passage starts with verse 10. Moses has covered an array of different laws on how to live, maybe worship. He talks about choosing your leadership. He talked about rehashed the 10 Commandments. He has covered so much. But right now, he has a specific affinity for the poor. He's really concerned, as is God. God is giving him this message about the poor. If you know anything about God, God is concerned about justice, and he wants the poor, or the least of these. In our lesson, it's called the marginalized. He wants them taken care of. And sometimes as we go into the promised land and we prosper, we forget about the marginalized. We get so caught up in our own living, in our own buying, our own selfishness, we forget about the marginalized, or we even mistreat them. And God, through Moses, does not want that to happen. And the marginalized that he's going to talk about is going to be the sojourner. That's going to be the person who's a foreigner working in the land of Israel, in their territory. He's going to talk about the fatherless, which is the orphan, that the father somehow died, he no longer has a provider. And he's going to talk about the widow whose husband has died, and she's unable to take care of herself, or life is very difficult for them. These three categories represents the least of these, the marginalized, in the Hebrew society, in the Jewish culture. They have no one to speak for them. They own no land. Some of them can't get a job because they have no skills, or can't work because they're too young, or maybe because they don't speak the language, or they're susceptible to be mistreated, taken advantage of. And so what God doesn't want to happen is for them to go into this promised land and start treating people, the least of these, the marginalized, the same way, with the same disdain, with the same harshness, with the same apathy, with the same cruelty as they were treated, as the ancestors were treated in Egypt. Doesn't want that to happen. If God sees that's happening, Israel is going to be in a lot of trouble. That's the big picture. God is concerned about the marginalized. And guess what? If God is concerned about the marginalized, guess what? You and I today need to be concerned about the marginalized. Those who do not have a voice. Those who are taken advantage of. Those who are left out the big picture. Those who are exploited. Okay? Those who are paid below minimum wage. Those who live in poverty. Those who are unemployed. Those who may be sick. Those who may be disabled. It's a lot of people that fit into that category, and we cannot ignore them. We have got to take care of, because a society is measured not how much it prospers, but how well it takes care of the least of these, and that includes the elderly, those who can't take care of themselves. So let's see what Moses is saying to his people. Verse 10, it says, when you make your neighbor alone. So we're talking about alone. Sometimes, instance, people need a loan. They fall on hard times. They need money, and they go to other people to lend money to them. So Moses is setting out rules for lending out money. When you make your neighbor alone, so you make your neighbor alone of any sort, any type of loan, any type of reason, you shall not go into his house to collect his pledge. Meaning that you don't go, you say somebody wants $500, you don't go in their house and start picking out the collateral for that $500. You don't shame him. You don't intimidate him. You don't bully him. You treat that person that needs that loan, that we're going to find out really the poor person, with dignity and respect. Okay? You don't go in the house and try to take over and take advantage of that individual and end up taking more collateral or more of a pledge than it is necessary. Okay? So here it says, you shall not go into the house to collect the pledge. Give that person who needs that money respect. Give that family respect. Don't take advantage of them. Don't bully and don't intimidate, and don't try to pick out what's always in your best interest. Be fair and just in all that you do. Verse 11 says, this is the rule. This is what you do. Instead of going to the house, you shall stand outside. That's in a respectful way. That's showing respect. You just don't barge in that house. You show that person respect. And the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge out to you. Use that pledge as a garment. We're talking about people that don't have any money, so it's not like they have what we have in our house, TVs or radios or phones or tablets or furniture. No, they don't have that. They're poor. Okay? So the person who needs a loan brings out a pledge or collateral for the loan to that person. And if that person doesn't like it, then they don't make the loan. But you don't go in the house and disrespect them. You show that person respect. Meaning that, you gotta understand, the loan is to help and not to hurt. It's not like you don't want to be a loan shark. You want to do a loan to that person that he can pay back. That's fair. Okay? So I'll just give you a hint, a little suggestion, is that what me and my wife do is that we don't really loan money. If somebody comes to us and they need money, we may loan or give as much as we can afford to give away. So if they don't pay it back, then there's no love lost and our relationship is not destroyed. A lot of times relationships are destroyed because people lend more money than they can afford to lose. And when the money's not paid back, it's a big argument, a big spat. It's called hard feelings and all that kind of stuff. My suggestion to you is that don't lend any more money that you can afford to lose or give away. But in the case that you feel like you're compelled to lend that money, do it with dignity and respect, as this passage is talking about, okay? You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge to you. Look what it says right here. Gives us more detail. And if he is a poor man, now he's going to the poor man, the least of these, the marginalized. You shall not sleep in his pledge. A pledge, where we're talking about here, is a garment. Okay? That poor man, probably the only thing that he owns is that cloak, that garment that he sleeps in. He wears it at night, and he goes to bed with it when it's time to go to sleep. He needs that, or else he would be cold, or he may become sick. Okay? But you show that person respect by, look what it says right here. You shall restore to him the pledge as the sun sets. Meaning in the morning, you shall get the pledge because he owes you money. But when nighttime comes, you give it back. And that's a trusting relationship. You give it back so he can have a good night's sleep with a warm garment on. And then when the morning comes, you take it back, and you do this until the loan is paid back. It's called a trusting relationship, an understanding relationship. And Moses is putting this in writing so there's no confusion. Remember, I talked about my son and his roommate. It wasn't in writing, caused a lot of confusion, caused a lot of distrust, because nobody could remember what was said because it wasn't written down. Okay? So it says right here, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you. Okay? Meaning that bless you, being that he may speak well of you, may thank you for it, or it bless you, or God may see what you have done and you are in good favor with God. It pleases God. Okay? So that word blessed can mean a lot of things, but it probably means him speaking well of you or showing some type of gratitude. Okay? Look what it says here. And it shall be righteous for you before the Lord your God. God would have seen what you have done. That you have a relationship with this person you made a loan with. You're following by these guidelines. You're not exploiting him. You're not taking advantage of him. You're giving him his cloak at night so he can be warm, his garment so he can be warm. In the morning where it's warm, you take it from him, and that cycle continues. And that's pleasing to God. God will look at you and say, that person is doing what is right in my eyes. What he is doing is pleasing to me. In other words, God will like your conduct. He'll like the way you treat your neighbor, and God will possibly bless you. Okay? What you're doing is pleasing to God, and it shall be righteous for you before the Lord your God. How many people want their walk to be righteous before God? How many people want God to see how you live your life, how you treat your neighbor, and God says, amen, that's pleasing to me. That's a righteous man right there. That's what he's saying right here. You can lend money, you can help them out, but do it in a righteous manner. Do it in a way that preserves dignity. Don't be a loan shark where there's a high exorbitant interest rate where you're taking advantage of them. Some people lend money so they can repossess the car. Some people lend money so they can keep the pledge. No, this is the key here is that you want that pledge to go back because that person has paid you what he has owed you and nothing more. Okay? All right? No loan sharks. Okay? Don't lend more than you can afford to lose. Principle. Okay? 14. You shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy. Now, you shall not oppress. Oppress means take advantage of, exploit, not pay a fair wage, not pay at all, delay payment, treat harshly, treat unfairly, disrespect, have no integrity for this worker, be dishonest, okay? You shall not oppress a hired worker. That's a day laborer, okay? A hired worker, somebody that you are hiring to do a job, okay? In those days, probably was a day laborer, okay? Who is poor, all right? Who is poor, meaning that they're living in poverty. They're disadvantaged, okay? They don't have what you have. They're poor and needy. You can look at them and you can tell that they're impoverished, they need certain things, or they're lacking certain things, okay? In other words, you are hiring them and they are in desperate need of the money that you're going to pay them for the service they will provide. You look at them, they are in desperate need. They're poor and they're needy. They need to be paid. They need this job. They need the funds that you promised them, okay? So you shall not oppress a hired worker who is poor and needy, whether he is one of your brothers, whether he is Jewish or he's a sojourner. Whether he's Jewish or foreigner, it doesn't matter. Okay? You treat everybody fairly, everybody the same. You don't treat the Jewish brother better than you treat the foreign brother. You don't treat the foreigner better than you treat your own Jewish brother. You treat them the same, justly and fairly, and you pay them the same on time. Okay? It says, whether he is one of your brothers or one of your sojourners who are in your land within your own towns. Okay? So treat everybody the same. When you have somebody working for you, don't disrespect them. Don't dishonor them. Treat them justly, fairly. Just think back when you were in Egypt, okay? How you were mistreated. How did you like that? Think about on a job that you may have where you had a cruel boss, a boss that was not understanding, a boss that was very harsh and critical of you. Maybe it was a boss that didn't pay you on time. Maybe it was a boss that tried to cheat you out of your paycheck every time. You know how that feels, okay? You know how it feels to be mistreated. You know how it feels to be oppressed, working long hours for a little bit of money, not getting paid when you're supposed to get paid, getting paid weeks later when you got people that your family has to eat and bills to pay. It can cause serious issues in your life. And so what Moses is saying here is that do not oppress anybody that you hire to work for you. Okay? Do not oppress. And it says right here, let me go on some more. Verse 15. You shall give him his wages on the same day. These are day laborers. In that day and time, there were day laborers. We have day laborers here. And when you get a day laborer, you pay them on time and you pay them a fair wage and you don't oppress them. Because if you don't pay them on the same day, they can't go out and buy food for their family. They can't go out and buy the things that they need because they live in day to day. We ought to understand, many of us know what it means to live paycheck to paycheck. Meaning that we miss one paycheck, we're almost asking for food stamps. We're almost going to get our house foreclosed. We're almost going to get kicked out. It's going to cause problems. Our bills, our checks are going to bounce. Our bills are going to mount up if we miss one paycheck. If somebody messes with our money, we are in trouble. So just think about this day laborer. He needs his money too. He needs food. He has bills to pay. He has a family to provide for. Don't shortchange them. Don't gyp them. Don't gyp them or oppress them by holding on to their money. Okay? So Moses is laying out how to get, these are the rules. These are what you need to do, okay? He says, you shall give him his wages on the same day before the sun sets. I mean, when he finished working, you pay him. For he is poor. He's living in poverty. You can see that he's poor and counts on it, okay? He needs that money, okay? He needs it, okay? Lest he cry against you to the Lord. In other words, you don't want him praying to God and telling God how bad you treated him, how crying out to God, God, I need this money, but he won't pay me. God, I got bills to pay, but I worked, I did what I'm supposed to do, and yet he's holding on to my money. He's trying to take advantage of me. He's oppressed. You don't want God to hear his cries. Because you think back in Egypt, God heard, after 40 years, God heard the cries of the Jews, of the Hebrews. He heard them and God did something about it. So you don't want them crying out like your ancestors cried out and have God come and put a judgment on you. You don't want that. It says, lest he cry out against you and you will be guilty in sin. See, what we have to understand this is that when we are, the way we treat people, God knows about it. God sees all. What we do in the dark will come to the light. We have to live a life that's a life that walks in the fear of God. So that's going to allow us to treat anybody that we hire, a day laborer or somebody that we over supervise, somebody that works for a company, whatever. We're going to treat them justly because we know that God is watching. We have an attitude that we fear God, or we have an attitude that we want to please God in everything that we do. Understand that God sees every unjust act. And he's not pleased with it. And you don't want the unjust people crying out to God, telling God how bad you're mistreating them, because God will know, already knows, he'll find you guilty and will have to do something about it, because God is a just God. He can't let things go, unjust things go that way. He has to be just in all that he does. Okay? So let's make sure that we treat people right. We're fair with people. We don't jet people. Make sure if we owe people money, we pay them back. Okay? If somebody owes us and we don't try to exploit them because they owe us money, make sure that we treat people correctly. That will please God. That will bring blessings into your life. Okay? Verse 16, fathers shall not be put to death. Now we go into a passage that is in the middle. I'm not sure why it's there, but it emphasizes individual responsibility. Fathers shall not be put to death because of their children. Okay? Must have been something going around, or something that whereas if the children messed up, the whole family suffered. And so what now Moses is saying, we're going to the promised land. Okay? So we know, so if fathers shall not be put to death because of their children. If the children sin, and the children's sin deserves being put to death, guess what? That child or those children, they're put to death, but not the father. Individual responsibility. Everybody's accountable for their own sins. Okay? It says this, nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers. If the father messes up big time, the children are not going to reap the wrath also. The father will be accountable for his own sin, and the children will not be accountable for the father's sin, but their own sin. Okay? Individual responsibility. Okay? The father is responsible for what he does. The children is responsible for what they do. The father is not to be punished for what the children do, and the children not to be punished for what the father does. Okay? Individual responsibility. Each one shall be put to death for his own sin. Okay? So when they go into this new society, it's this, each person has to be a law-abiding citizen. Each person has to do the right thing. Okay? It's none of this, the whole family suffers because one person made a mistake. Individual responsibility. That's what Moses is trying to say. Everybody is going to be guilty or held accountable for their own sin. All right? 17. Okay? Goes back to justice for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall not pervert the justice due to the sojourner or to the fatherless, or take a widow's garment in pledge. Pervert, that means undo justice, twist justice. We talked about this last week. Favoritism perverts justice. Bribery perverts justice. Favoring the poor over the rich perverts justice. Favoring the rich over the poor perverts justice. Anything that's not doing the right thing perverts justice. Okay? You shall not pervert justice due to in this case, the sojourner, the foreigner, or to the fathers, that's the orphan, or take a widow's garment in pledge. The widow these are the least of society. They don't own land. They barely own probably the shirt on their back. And in this case right here, with the widow, this garment that the widow had is probably the only thing that she owns, and you are not to take that in pledge. She needs that. So Moses is putting things that are off limits to the least of these. You cannot pervert justice. In a society that you go into the promised land, one that pleases God, there you have to give justice to the least of these. Because we can't be a society that takes advantage of the least of these. We can look in our society and we can see how this is not being applied. There's different, we can look in the world and see how justice is being perverted. It is not a good thing. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing when the least of these can't get justice. But I do know if the least of these are getting justice, chances are everybody else above them is receiving justice. So when I look at the justice of the poor, of the sojourner, the widow, the orphan, the elderly, it tells me a lot about the society, on what's important to it and where it stands as far as justice. Okay? All right? So the widow's protected. You can't take a pledge. If you make a loan, then you make a loan to her with no pledge at all. You cannot take that garment that she desperately needs. So you got to remember, back then, they were poor. They didn't have all what we have today. They basically had, just to have a jacket or cloak, a garment was a lot. Just something to keep you warm. Okay? 18. But you shall remember that you are a slave in Egypt. Okay? When you are giving out justice, or when justice is due somebody, think back for when your forefathers, your ancestors were in Egypt, and think about the injustice that they came under. How hard it was for them. How they cried out to God over 400 years because the oppression was so bad. The mistreatment was so bad. Long hours, getting paid for nothing, not having enough food to eat, having children killed, being taken advantage of, no health care, no time off, okay? No voice, nobody there to speak on their behalf. Think of being beaten. Think about how bad it was and how they must have felt. And then you look at your neighbor or the foreigner or the widow or the orphan, and that ought to compel you or motivate you to give that person justice because you know how it felt. It just wasn't that long ago. Just a generation ago. And you heard the stories. Just like you and I, if you're African American, you heard the stories in your family of how your great-grandfather or your ancestors before that, how they were mistreated and what they had to go through. And so that should compel you not to discriminate against anybody, not to be prejudiced against anybody, not to say racial slurs or anything against anybody because you know what your ancestors went through. Okay? Remembering our past is a great motivation for treating people right. That's what Moses is saying here. But you shall, that's an imperative. Remember that you are a slave in Egypt. What was it like being a slave in Egypt? It was horrible. And look what God did to you. And the Lord your God redeemed you from there. You ought to say, God, I see what God has done to me. God was so good to me. In my time of need, in my time of misery, he reached out and redeemed me. So now when I see somebody in their time of misery, I'm going to bless them in some kind of way because God was a blessing to me. I'm not going to be like the Egyptians and mistreat them. I'm going to be like God, my Father, and be a blessing to those who are in need, those who are being mistreated, those who are poor, living in poverty. Okay? It says right here, the Lord your God redeemed you for there. Therefore, I commit you to do this. Okay? Now, this is how God is instituted in this time of day, how we need to care for those who are poor and in need. It's a great way. Okay? It maintains the integrity of the poor, and it also doesn't deprive the people who have means of their livelihood. Look at this. When you reap your harvest, meaning you cut down your harvest in the field, the grain, okay? When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, meaning that when you go down and you cut down that harvest, okay? All that wheat, okay? And you forget something, don't try to go back and take everything, okay? You take what you need. The first cut around, you probably got all that you needed. And if there's something left in the field, it says, you shall not go back and get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. So as you're harvesting and you go to first go around, you have got all the wheat. You've got 90% of the wheat. You got 95% of the wheat. It's only a little bit left and it's scattered around. Don't go back and try to take all of it. Don't try to go back and be greedy. You leave that for the sojourner, the orphan, and the widow. Now, the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner, all they have to do is go and work for it. So it's not a hand out, it's a hand up. Yes, you're giving them something, but yet they have to work for it. That maintains their dignity, their work ethic. And also it gives a display of your generosity and your compassion for the poor. You see how that works? And how that goes, both sides' integrity are in place. There's respect on both sides. The poor person is working for his means. So it can't be said, well, you gave me this and it was freebie. No, they had to go and work. Okay? Maintains their integrity. I love that. And that's a message today. Is that a lot of times what hurts us is that we look for free things when we're in need instead of maybe looking to work for it. I know there's some people out there that can't work. That's a different category. But if you're able to work. No, it may not be the job you want. No, it may not be the pay scale you want. But keep working and God will honor your work. God will honor you. And maybe God will bless you to a better paying job, a better job. But it's better to work than not to work. Okay? If you can work. All right? All right. Honor. There's honor in working. Look what he says right here. Okay? Second thing he says this right here. Okay, let me finish it. That the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. Okay? Look what he says right here. God said, I'm going to bring blessings to you for being generous to those who are poor. I'm going to bring blessings. I see what you've done. I've noticed what you've done. It pleases me. It's the right thing to do. And so I'm going to bless you in all the work with your hands. Because you're blessing the poor. God said, I'm going to turn around and bless you. When you beat your olive tree, you shall not go over them again. When you beat the olive tree, all the olives fall. Leave some in that branch, in that tree. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. Guess what? You have got all the olives, 95% of them, and what you need, more than what you need, and you will cast aside that branch or that tree and let the sojourner, the orphan, and the widow go and get the rest. Okay? Again, you're allowing them to have integrity, honor, and work for what they have. That's a good thing. God has made us to work. Okay? You're not having pity on them. No, you're allowing them. You've got what you want. You're not trying to clean everything clean. And they can go behind you and get what's left. And based on that, with the wheat and with the olives, and we'll see some more, they're able to feed their families. They're able to live. They're able to eat. They're able to do some things. Okay? Then it says right here. He says, when you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterwards. Okay? It shall be for the sojourner, fatherless, and the widow. Look what he says. We got the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow 3 times. Okay? What does that tell you and me? That sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow is important to God. And it's important that we allow them to have a livelihood, to allow them to eat, to allow them to take care of their family. Okay? It says, you shall not, if we get grapes in your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterward. I mean, leave some grapes for them. How does that apply to you and me today? God has given us a paycheck. Okay? Give God his 10% or more. Take the rest and buy what you need to buy for your family. But leave a little bit and give to the poor. Leave a little bit and give to someone that you know that's in need. Leave a little bit and give to someone so they can help with their family. Leave a little bit. Maybe you'll call maybe a day laborer and say, come do this for me. I got some money set aside. I need this done, but I'm going to pay you. Leave some for those who are in need. Okay? Don't take give it to God. Don't take all your money and spend it all yourself that you can't help somebody else. That's what he's saying here. Because we need to remember how it was maybe when we grew up and how hard it was. If we didn't have it hard, maybe how hard our parents had it. Maybe they didn't have it hard. Maybe how hard we can go far back enough and somebody had it hard. And so we need to always have that in our forefront, how hard we had it and how God blessed us, so we can have in our hearts that there are people out there that need the same blessing we got. God is using us as a vehicle to bless them. They need food, they need water, and we're there to help them. That's what this is about. God has a concern for the marginalized. God wants the marginalized to receive justice. Okay? He wants them, he don't want you taking advantage of them on the loans. Okay? He wants every person to be accountable for their own sin. He wants those who are landowners, who are wealthy, to leave some food left so they can go and harvest it themselves and feed their family. He wants justice for them. And he wants them to be treated with honor and dignity. And a lot of times in our society, as it was in Egypt, we look upon poor people and we take advantage of them. We try to pay them less. We try to deny them rights. We try to overcharge them in rent. We take advantage of them because they have no voice. They own no land. And that's not a just society. That's not how people who are blessed in a land of milk and honey live and treat their neighbor. That's not how it works. Okay? You shall remember that you are a slave in the land of Egypt. Second time saying that. What does that mean? Repeat it word for word. God wants us to remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. And look what God has brought you from. Therefore, I command you to do this. Just think back. Think back when you were unemployed. Think back when you didn't have enough food to eat. Think back maybe you're in college. You barely made it. You don't know how you made it. Think back when you couldn't buy clothes on your back. You had to maybe have hand-me-downs. Think about when you had it hard. You had no car. You had to walk everywhere you went. You had to ride public transportation. Think about when you couldn't afford a computer, couldn't afford a phone. Think about what God has brought you from, and turn around and be a blessing to somebody else. See, I think it pays to have a good memory. God is challenging us, you and me, to have a good memory. The better memory you and I have about the goodness of God and what God has redeemed us from, the better we'll treat our neighbor. That's the way it goes. The better we'll be just and righteous citizens, treating our neighbors fairly and just, providing for them, allowing them to have a means to make a living, paying them a just wage, not taking advantage of them. See, the cure to our problems in society is just right in the Word. It's how we treat each other. We don't need government to do everything. Christians are compelled to do the right thing. We should be in the forefront. When the government does it, it's always for the wrong motive. When Christians do it, it's always to glorify God. And God will turn around and bless that. When we get the government involved, oftentimes it's a perversion of justice. But when Christians do it, they do it from a pure heart, it's always just and righteous. Well, I hope this lesson has been a blessing to you. I hope it's been challenging to you. God, through Moses, has given us a challenge to do the right thing. He just wants us to do the right thing. Treat people fairly. Treat people right, no matter who they are, no matter what status they are in society. Treat them right and God will bless you. Care for the marginalized. God will bless you. Don't forget about them. Don't forget how hard they're having it. Just because you live on the other part of town, away from it, don't forget about people living on the other side of town who are suffering, who are hurting. Don't forget about them. They have rights, they have needs. They have rights and they have needs. Don't forget about them. Know your history. Remember what it was like in Egypt when our ancestors were slaves, when they had it hard, when they suffered injustice. Use that to motivate you to help somebody else and be more like Christ. Thank you so much. God bless you. I hope you have a great Sunday. Have a great Sunday school. I hope something was said that can help you in your preparation, that can help you in your Sunday school class. Remember to leave a comment in the comment section. And guess what? We'll talk again next week. God bless you.